I did something I haven't done in a long time. It was about midnight, and the air is like upper 60s late at nighttime right now during this summer of August 2026. And I just wanted some space and some time to myself. And just, I don't know what it was. It was almost like I was led to do it. I took a folding chair. I just got done taking a nice, good shower. I was all clean and relaxed. And I set it up outside in the dark. Everybody's asleep. Everybody in the neighborhood, my daughter. And I just sat in this chair looking at the sky and just relaxing. And I was just in my underwear, and I can feel the wind just at that perfect temperature sweeping across my shoulders, my back, my legs. And some people call this a wind bath. And I just really closed my eyes and just relaxed into it. And of course, with all things, I can never have just the normal human experience. At this point, being human is almost even questionable for me. I feel like I come from galaxies far away of some sort. But it evoked in me what I think is like a return to primal living, to become like an animal. Of course, in the circumstances, the weather's perfect. You know, you wouldn't want to do this in Antarctica or something. But I think you would still want to be outside no matter where you're at least for a few minutes every day. And when I say primal living, animalistic living, is because it seems to me, and I've noticed in myself, being under electric light, being under lights all the time, being in a big city where there's street lights on all the time and things humming, so many lights that it clouds out most of the stars. We've become like homogenized and like sterilized, I think, spiritually, disconnected. And I see a lot of people, and it may be my own perception, but it seems like they are sick inside and on the outside as well. Not very happy. You know, and we see these videos and things like, you should ground yourself. Scientists now show that walking barefoot on the ocean, was something I saw today, actually conducts more electricity into your body and grounds you and makes you healthier, happier, and was proven to build your immune system and all this blah 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 stuff. And it, you see, probably, I don't know, even know what to put a number, like 80%, I'd say, 70 to 80% of my life is animalistic primal living, working in construction and roofing in particular. I'm always up on a roof. I'm never even really in the shade. Gardening, all these things. I'm always out in the elements. I rarely use air conditioning or central heating. But I noticed when I went to the dentist, my dentist was telling me that she had like this thing called the grounding blanket. And it's a blanket, I guess, I haven't even looked into it, but it's got these magnets, I guess, and it plugs into a wall and it's supposed to ground you. And she said, when she told me about it, I was like, are you kidding me? That's really real? And she goes, well, coming from someone like you who gardens all the time, and she's like, people like me, we rarely get to go outside and do these sort of things. So this helps people. And I thought to myself, yeah, most people's days, they probably wake up in a perfectly controlled environment. It's probably 72 degrees in their home. They're under electric prosthetic lights. They have a cup of coffee and shit their pants, and then eat breakfast, take a shower, all inside their home. And the only time they'll see the light of day or breathe fresh air is the space between the front door and the car on their way to work. And then they drive in traffic, get to their job. The only next time they see is maybe the few minutes from this car to inside the building, like my dentist. And then they spend about 8 hours. She owns the business, so probably more than 8 hours, under electric lights, prosthetic lights, and electricity and buzzing and things around walls and stuffy. There's no windows open. You know, you can't really have windows open at a business like that, all the traffic and everything going by. So recirculating air, so that's not hot in there, so it's cold. It's recycled prosthetic air, you know, the same air being recirculated so it stays nice and cool and pleasant for the clients, which is, I guess, a good thing. And then you get in your car and you drive in traffic and you get home. By the time you're home, you're pretty much tired, and you got to make dinner, depending if you have a family and stuff. You eat dinner, and maybe you'd go outside to have a drink or something. I don't know, sit in the jacuzzi or whatever it is that wealthy people would do. But it's very rare that they spend an aggregate, a decent amount of time outside. And even myself, I've noticed that I've become so busy trying to figure out how I'm supposed to survive financially and all these different, building my businesses and things like that. And I get so preoccupied in just thought alone, even though I'm sitting outside, that I never really bother to look up or to sit and just experience being in the darkness of the night with a gentle, warm wind just pouring over your skin. Seeing the 3 stars I think we have in Southern California that you can see sitting in your backyard. But it's still enough to evoke animalistic living. And I think I've been doing this experiment where I had this idea of how inflation and money and things right now at this present moment of August 2026, I think we're going to hit some bad times. Everything's pointing to it, but who knows? But I got to thinking, how animalistic, primal could I go? Maybe the answer is not working harder all the time and ignoring being in nature and having wind baths and time for yourself to notice the stars and the formation of the clouds. Like today, there was actually a beautiful sky at sunset. Working so hard for these things and not really getting too far. And maybe even getting far, but missing out. Meaning, one of the greatest, a lot of you probably heard this, but I think it bears repeating, is life's not the destination, it's the journey. And it's these little sayings that we're like, yeah, I know that. But yeah, but how much do we apply this in the day-to-day of our lives? Hardly any. It's always about get everything done so I could finally don't have to think about anything. I could sit and I could rest. Maybe the answer is to go more animal, more primal. Instead of making more money to solve our problems, which could be contributing to the inconvenience of conveniences, what if we made less? How can we figure out how to make less money and live with less so that we can have more of a balance of these experiences? You know, another one I want to share with you guys is when I was in Florida, I was seeking out a community out there, a farm living situation to where I can live with other people and grow my own food and all those sort of things. And there was a huge thunderstorm. It was my first time in Florida, and I just love wearing the minimal amount of clothes, and I love the warm temperatures. My body thrives in warm temperatures way better than cold temperatures. I've lived in Oregon where it can get down to like single digits sometimes in the teens, and it's not my best. I still got outside. But how can we live with less and live more animal to have those experiences? And I've noticed with this experiment with not eating, like trying to not even put salt on my food. Usually I eat like some zucchini and eggs for breakfast every day to save money, and it's healthy for me, being a type 2 diabetic in remission, meaning I have it all stabilized as long as I eat healthy. Refraining from even eating salt, like how simple can I live? Can I mentally sustain it, right? And the thing I found was I was fighting in my mind, like I wanted something sweet, I wanted something savory. And again, this just brings out the inconvenience of convenience, which I like to call, to where I'm watching the dialogue in my head. I'm full. I have enough food in my stomach. I'm not starving. Don't even have a bit of hunger. But the food that we have these days, especially processed foods and stuff, which I stay clear away from as much as possible. Even having seasoning salts and these things, like our food has to taste good. It's like the observation I've noticed in myself is that how food is such a big part of all of our lives, not just my life. But I notice how much it affects us emotionally and psychologically. You know, you have a full stomach, you just ate a bunch, but your mind's telling you, I want something else. I want something sweet. I want something savory. I want this, that. I want stimulation. And in order to, the reason I would say of the unhealthiness and sickness and things like this is because a lot of us, including myself, I think are being led by the nose by food in general. And you think about how hard we have to work to go eat out and how it's expensive. I think I took my daughter for pastrami and a French fry at a well-known place in Southern California. If you know about the Hat, you know what I'm talking about. It was like $45-50 just for the two of us. By the time we got a sandwich, French fries, and a drink, it's expensive. And the food is delicious, but then it leaves you high carbs, shoots my blood sugar through the ceiling, and it does come back down because I'm healthier now. But when I look at it, it's like we spent all that money, like $50, right down the drain for a moment of pleasure that came and then left. In fact, for me, when I eat shit food like that, I can feel the difference. Home cooked meals, I feel great. But I just noticed how once I started eating shit food again and experimenting with seasonings and stuff like that, is how much I become addicted to them and how much psychologically, how much real estate in my mind that this leads me away. And trying to live a primal, animalistic life, doing without it as an experiment, just being able to observe. This is one of my powers, I think, that I've developed, is to become an observer of everything, to stop participating in many things of life, of everything in life, and stop participating even with yourself. That may sound completely psychotic, but have you ever sat, like I said, in your underwear in a chair in the middle of the night taking a wind bath and attempt to meditate, to quiet everything down, and the mind's like a fucking circus? There's just monkeys, there's songs, there's something that happened to me 10 years ago, and how does that apply today? What's going to happen tomorrow? What happened in the past? Why did the past happen? All of these thoughts, you can't quiet them down. So one of the powers that I've had is to stop participating in the emotionality of what's going on in your head, and to watch yourself. And what you'll do is, as you keep practicing non-participation of not just everything around you, society and all of these things, is you start to see patterns and you start to observe yourself instead of being in the eye of the tornado where everything's going nuts. You can slowly, it's not easy, and I'm not saying I have it mastered, but I notice I can step back before I get sucked back in quite often. I can step back and I can start to observe myself having these experiences. And when you do that, you start to notice, well, these aren't my experiences, they're just my thoughts. These are things coming. If you sit long enough and observe it, the thoughts, the uncomfortable or the comfortable joy thoughts, will actually dissipate and move on, and something else will replace it. But it gives you the power to get closer to getting in control of your life by seeing these things. And this is what happens to me on a daily basis. Just sitting half naked, taking a wind bath, halfway, 50% in the moment, enjoying it, but always as a psychological cosmonaut, I'm always out there observing myself, listening to the dialogue. And And I think being in controlled environments with air conditioning and central heating, never being underneath the sun, never being out in nature, getting sun on your skin, or being cold, or being really hot and sweaty. You know, I have to say, for my primal life, being out cooking outdoors and everything, I'm just sweating right now. Like during the midday, it's been like close to 100 degrees. But never doing these things sort of shuts yourself off. I mean, a lot of people say, like, when you get too comfortable and you baby yourself, you become soft. You actually become unhealthy. I think there's a degree, like another thought that I have, I know I spur all over the place, but this whole cold plunge thing where you dunk yourself in cold water and, you know, put yourself to these things, to me, that's like very stressful and a situation I don't like. But I think it's good for people who are, say, spiritually numb, physically numb to all of this stuff out there, to the experiences of nature and life. I think that it sort of shocks them and kind of brings them back. It's almost like what do they call those things? Those little clamps that bring you back to life, the defibrillators. And I think maybe it's something that's necessary for people to shock them awake, to get them, and maybe they feel like they're awake for just that moment, right? But I think when you always immerse yourself like an animal into the elements that are around you, you become accustomed to them. And sure, it doesn't feel comfortable to be sweating all over the place, but it actually kind of feels good to me because all of the toxins, I feel like, come out of my body. Like my skin feels smooth and clean after a good sweat. I notice I don't stink as much when I sweat a lot. So a lot of these discomforts, living primal and animalistic, I think, is a way for us to actually live healthier. Now, I know a lot of science says that in the old days, to live to be 30 was like a senior citizen, that we died young. I don't know if I believe in all that. I know they found a snowman, or a man preserved in the snow, who was supposed to be like 70 something years old, you know, and he was like this was like a 1,000-year-old or older. I can't remember. I think they called him Inky or something. They said he was a senior citizen, like today's time, with fur and everything. And he was walking. He was an old man, preserved in the snow, lived a long, long life. But I think some sort of equilibrium of technology marrying nature is where I look like. I mean, this is something I think about every single day. When I'm pouring the water out of my water faucet and putting it into my gravity filtration system, I can just smell the chlorine hitting my nose. It's like my cup of wake up spiritual coffee every morning, where it's like, what the fuck are we doing? You know, it's recycled toilet water. Not on my premise. It's just the city I live in recycles shit water and, you know, into drinking water, because there's a big water problem in Southern California. So I see these things and I'm aware of these things that I think the general population likes to cover up or ignore, or is not even cares to be aware of. So every day I look at these things and I say to myself, why the fuck am I doing this? And what am I going to do to get out? And that's what comes across as far as retirement, joy, and health. I notice that I'm a lot more happier when I'm outdoors. I'm a lot more happier when I'm not out trying to build a business and make, you know, thousands of dollars, which I've done in the past. And where I'm at now, another story for another day, I guess. But it's almost like deliberately living simple, I think, and animalistic, primal living, exposing yourself to the elements and things like that, really forces you to measure yourself, to see yourself, to experience yourself. When you're comfortable all the time, I think it just becomes numb. And I see a lot of these people on the internet talking about how horrible things are and just how strange things are. Not necessarily how horrible, but how strange. They feel alone. They feel like there's no meaning. And I guess, I don't know how well, I doubt information like this is going to be sexy. I think someone complaining and pointing out all the bad shit all the time probably has more attention than somebody giving solutions. I think this is all unconventional. That's why I call myself the unconventionalist. I'm fine being alone. In fact, I know that I've been alone my entire life. The only time I was really part of somebody was when I was in my mother's womb. After I exited, I've been alone ever since, spiritually, psychologically, everything. I'm fine with that. I've come to terms. That's why I call myself the unconventionalist. But I know for a lot of these people, that's a very strange concept. And I'm 50 years old. I think a lot of these people are just starting out. They're a lot younger. And I think they might be experiencing, when you wake up from what people, I like the saying, the waking up from the matrix. I think it's a very painful process. I think it's a very strange process. And I think it could be a very angry process, because I think a lot of people realize, like, what the fuck have I been doing my entire life? What have I been working for? A bunch of nothing. I've been living a lie. I've been living for other people to please them, and I haven't pleased myself. And I think it's a very strange world, and it takes time to mature and to grow into the fact, and then to decide for yourself, am I going to accept this? Accepting that you are alone and always have been alone, and there's nothing really anybody could do to change what you feel inside you, is probably a very scary thing, I think, for people. I just can't remember, because I've been doing it for so long. To give it some instance, I've had one tried relationship, which was horrible, in 8 years. And that lasted only a few days. So in 8 years, I have not been on a date. I haven't had any, I guess I'll go ahead and say it. I don't really fucking care. I have not had sex, and except for a few times in 8 years, compacted in a few days, and that wasn't really all what it's cracked up to be. I don't know, maybe I'm deranged. But yeah, I think it's kind of difficult for society right now, for a lot of people who are waking up. And I think an answer to that is to stop participating in everything as much, like everything. Stop participating in everything. Stop participating in the food. You still got to eat. But to refrain from stimulation, like full-blown stimulation all the time. And guess what? Recovering from type 2 diabetes, not having sugar, carbs, and things like that. When you do finally get to, say, have a beer, if you even want one, or some French fries, or whatever it is, fill in the blank, it's going to be one of the best things you've ever had. It was 3 years, and I finally had my first beer, and I was like, wow. Did I drink it? Did I get drunk? No, I don't ever want to go back to that. I still don't even crave sugar. But there's a lot of things like sushi and some foods that I would have, and it was just so empowered, like so profound. And here's the sick part. A lot of food, and here we go back on the food subject matter, a lot of food that I didn't have and went back and ate, it wasn't all what it was cracked up to be. Like a piece of pizza was like, really? That's not what I remembered it. I don't remember it being that great. Now beer and sushi, which go together great, and Asahi Dry, by the way. I don't know if you're a Sapporo person or Asahi. That was something. But even then, abused, it just becomes nothing. So I think the way out of this dilemma, confusion, fear, loneliness, isolation, I would say even depression, is to remove yourself, stop participating in the world around you and these type of things, because you've obviously realized, if you're waking up, you're like, you know what, this isn't for me, But if you go deeper, I don't think you are for you. You've built a facade of who you think you are and being in the comforts of heating and cooling and perfect temperature all the time, no sunshine and things, has led us delusional to the point where we're so disconnected. But the biggest one is that you have allowed yourself, we have allowed ourselves to be shaped by the scalpels of society, both mentally, physically, I think, and spiritually, that we don't even know who we are. And the only way to find out who you are is to stop dwelling on who you are right now, who you think you are, and start participating in everything. Basically take a diet, not just from society and stimulation, social media and all those things, but a diet from yourself, if that even makes sense. I didn't even know that this was going to come up. I sort of just free flow with these things. But if you disconnect from the person that it's not you, and start to observing yourself, then it almost seems like you wake up. Not seems, like it, to me, it's something so simple, you know? You disassociate from yourself, from your thoughts and all these things, because these are the belief systems that make you think of that this is who I am. This is the emotions that I have. And as you start to non-participate and disassociate with your emotions and things like that, you start to notice that, wow, you know, all the emotions of anger, excitement, depression, and all these things, they'll come, they'll go. And you do this long enough, and you start to notice, wow, this isn't even me. These are just thoughts in my head. Anxiety of thinking, of worrying about what could happen. You know, I think it was Mark Twain says, I've known of thousands and thousands of worrisome and horrible things in life, but experienced very few. And I think that's what he coined. What I'm saying here is that there's all these horrible things in life that we worry about, stress out about, have anxiety and depression about, lust and want and need. And a lot of them don't happen. It's because they are just thoughts, or they are a fabrication of society's dialogue. I think a lot of people like to go to the gas station and pump each other up of how everything sucks, right? And you watch people, they actually get this sick laugh and this camaraderie of, yeah, the fucking gas prices, man, what could we do? Everything sucks. We're only these people, and the government controls everything, and we're just these sheep, you know, being led. No, if we went animalistic, if we went primal, I think it's the fortification, the things that holds up. We are the nails that hold up all of this stuff. And if we stop becoming the nails, the whole thing falls down. And I think that it's by living an animalistic primal life. This not only helps your health. Let's say you want to lose weight, you know, getting type 2 diabetes remission, get your heart healthy, your mind happy, your soul happy, all of these things. As we stop participating in what we have, this game shit show that we have in front of us, and even the shit show inside of ourselves. See, I like to pick on myself more than anybody else, like to observe myself. I'm my best test dummy. But as we separate ourselves from that, I believe, we start to see the game. Like, nobody even needs to be convinced that this whole shit show exists. Nobody needs to be convinced. In fact, you can't. And that's what makes me sick, is I have these wonderful conversations how everything's screwed up and what we can do about it. And we'll talk about it. Oh my God, we can this and that. And then nothing ever comes of it. As I said, every day when I'm smelling that chlorine, I'm filling my water, it reminds me, I want out. I want to live like an animal. Well, I hope that those who are lost, I know that it's very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to go through. I guess I'm just weathered. I'm an older man, been through a lot. And the only thing I can say to people is that I guess I can use, like, my daughter. My daughter teaches me all the time. She's 19-year-old, 18-year-old, you know, still in diapers. In case someone's wondering, those are diapers I buy for her. But she doesn't know the difference between isolation or really depression and things like that. Like, she's always happy. She's special needs. She's always happy. She's always ready to dance. It's not like she's just an angel and has the best days every single day. She has her bad days and good days. But for the most part, she's always willing to do things like make me dance to a song she likes in the middle of the hardware store. You know, we're in the aisle and I've got a dipper like Dancing with the fucking Stars. And some people will mock us, some people will watch us and thank us for making their day. But the biggest lesson she has reminded me that I've learned when I was a youngster was you got to stop giving a fuck what people think about you. You also, I think, got to stop giving a fuck what you think about you. Yeah, I was watching a show on and off. I don't really watch too much social media, but I was watching a fellow by the name of Dry Creek Wrangler, and he was telling this story from a book that he read where there's this husband and there's a party to go to, and his wife says, hey, don't you want to clean up and dress up? We're going to the party tonight. He goes, oh, there's no need to do that. Nobody knows me at that party, you know, so it doesn't matter. So they go to the party, and, you know, a few weeks pass, and there's another party that's showing him. The wife comes to her husband and tells him, hey, maybe you want to clean up and dress up a little bit? We're going to a party where, you know, your friends and family and everything's at. And he goes, I don't need to do that. Everybody knows me there. You know, you could just be yourself. It's called the art of not giving a fuck what anybody thinks about you, because nobody's really thinking about you anyways. I bring this up because I notice a lot of people are very self-conscious and everything. Where does that come from? You have to ask yourself. Most people who are worried about what they look like and how they're being perceived are not living in their bodies. They're not living in their soul, in their minds and their souls, but they're living in their minds, right? But they're not truly living in, I think, in the right cavities of their minds, the joyful parts of their minds. Their mind's not open, it's closed. It's worried about how you appear. You know, one of my sayings is, I hope I've invented it, is I prefer functionality before aesthetics. So fuck how everything looks. How does it perform? How does it function? Is it functioning well? Is the motor running good? Does it get you from point A to point B? Is it a great experience? I mean, you can look good, but that don't mean shit. You know, before I became this old guy, and I know that a friend of mine who was, he had the same experience that I had. Is for some reason, we were able to, how would you say, court several women in our lives, and we both agreed. We talked about this, and it would be probably the weirdest male conversation I think males can have. To most people, to us, was completely normal. Was that I asked him? I said, "Have you ever noticed, like, after a while, it was like we were attracted to these women for their looks and their bodies, and it was fantastic. You know, for the first couple times." You know, but then you'd have to start talking. Then you'd go to lunch and dinner and spend the night, and you start kind of hanging out with each other a little more, and you start to notice, like, God, this person just really doesn't have anything interesting to say, is not very intelligent, you know, probably so good looking that they got everything they ever wanted. They went to a job and applied for it. They got it because they're beautiful, right? They're not funny. They don't have any good jokes. They're not really talented in anything other than striking a pose and looking good. Even some of them, I think their sexual performance was kind of questionable, right? But what was interesting was that once you did this enough, and not enough men ever are privileged to have this experience, they're always led by, you know, the good looks. Like, I wish I could be with, oh man, if I could be with that chick, you know. And it's kind of like, no, you don't. It looks good on the outside, but there's nothing on the inside. And I know for most men it'd be like, you are completely whacked. But my friend, he's got a good, 15 years on me. And if you've had the experience, you know what I'm talking about. It was like, why? Why even do that? And after a while, it was like, you just kind of gave up, you know? My last relationship was with a fair looking person. It wasn't one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. I was like, you know, physically. And I matured, I think, enough to where it was like, yeah, why, God forbid, you got one of these girls pregnant and had to marry them or whatever the deal is, of somebody that's not intelligent, doesn't know you, you don't really know them, you have nothing much in common other than you can bump uglies, you know, and she looks really good in bed. And that's about it. Makes you feel proud walking down the street holding hands and all the guys are checking you out, go, God, I wish I could be him. Yeah, no, you don't. But wouldn't you rather have somebody that you can laugh with and that understands you? And I said that most men, this would probably go way over their heads. In fact, we have the macho shit coming out now where it's like you got to be the tough guy and the playa, you know. Having a lot of chicks is like the cool thing to do, right? That's only going to get you so far, I'd say. But a life lesson, an observation of that is that you got to stop caring what people think about you. And most people are suffering, even good looking people. I think, in fact, I think that really, really gorgeous women are actually handicapped, being that their looks are not going to last forever. And during their life, as I said, everything's pretty much easy for them. Men respond to them. They can get any guy they want, any job, most jobs, but they never really had to work. They never had to get out of their comfort zone other than spending an hour dolling themselves up every day, right? But what happens when that fades out? Now you've lived in a world where you've been pampered, kind of like this whole conversation we've been talking about living primal. These women never had to fight for anything. They never had to develop. They were never really challenged, right? And in fact, even I say that they're handicapped because if they are wanting to be truly seen, not just for their tits and ass and their very good looking face or anything, they can't be seen. They're almost invisible because of the handicap of how gorgeous they are. There's some women in the world that are so fucking beautiful. It's like, how is that even possible? Like, why? How did that even come to be? And it's like they're talking and you can't even hear a word they're fucking saying. You know, I have to say, being a male, it still happens to me every once in a while. You'll see a woman and she's talking or something. You don't even hear a word she's saying. You're just like, oh my God, don't look down there. Don't look down there. Stay eye level. Stay eye level. No, you're not having sex with her in your mind right now. You know what I mean? No, that's not what she looks like naked. You know, they're just beautiful. But you have to think about that. Step away and observe your thoughts and observe the situation of, wow, that would actually kind of suck to be that good looking in many ways. Anyways, that's what I have today. A bunch of observations.